This is Battle Legion. It's an interesting new game that I just picked up that feels like it's a cross between Totally Accurate Battle Simulator and Clash Royale. Structurally, it's a lot like Clash Royale. Basically, you set up an army, and you have very little. Actually, you know what? It's more like Clash of Clans, because in Clash Royale, you actually are spawning and manipulating your troops a little bit during the real battle. This is much more like Clash of Clans or like Totally Accurate Battle Simulator, where it's all about setting up an army and then letting them fight themselves. And it's your initial conditions that you set up that determine the outcome. This game, it's complicated. Like many other games, you know, in the mobile space, it's got a lot of different currencies. It's got a lot of different types of rewards, rhythms of rewards, different, you know, loops and cadences, and it's a lot to absorb all at once. I feel like I just barely understand it, but not quite. So I was playing it just like half an hour ago while I was getting my son to sleep, and so it looks like a chest that or I guess they call these wagons. There's a wagon that has unlocked over time while I was waiting. So let me just pop that sucker open. See what I got. So I got some Eternite. I'm not sure what Eternite is for. I've also got some gold. I know what gold is for buying stuff. And I got some unit shards. So these are like these add up to allow me to upgrade and expand my army. So great. Well, I just opened up one of these things, and there's another one that is ready for me to start unlocking. Okay, so this is an interesting monetization strategy. So these wagons, they take time to unlock, which, you know, time is cheap, especially since I don't have to do anything. I hit unlock, hit start unlocking, and now it's just going to sit there with a little clock above its head, you know, slowly unlocking over time, and eventually I'll get the prizes. I can speed it up by spending 16 gems if I want to, and you can't actually see how many gems I have. Let me move myself down here. So yeah, I've got 59 gems. You can see back up where my head used to be. And that seems like, why would I ever spend the gems? Well, what happens is you'll see to the left of that wagon, I've got another wagon that I'm building up towards. If I get 15 victory points, I think those are victory points, then another wagon will appear, and I can't start unlocking that wagon until the first wagon is done. And then if I fill up my third slot with another wagon, I can't even get any more wagons until I've unlocked them all. And that, you know, if I'm sitting down and I'm playing this game for a long period of time, I'll very quickly outstrip my space, and then I feel like, well, I'm wasting victory points. I'm getting all these victory points, and they're not giving me wagons unless I can rush one of these wagons open. So it's an interesting little pattern where if you've got a lot of self-control and you're not super into the game, it's not really sort of an intense strategy of monetization, but if you are super into the game and you really do want to play it for a long period of time, you start to really feel this sort of like this sense of loss from the rewards you're not getting if you're not paying the gems. So it's an interesting strategy where you're like, you know, sure, for me, I feel like, you know, I'm not super invested in this game, so I don't feel like I'm really being sort of pushed into the monetization, but I'm not going to be every audience member, and so you have to really sort of, when you're designing a game like this and a system like this, you have to decide where you draw the line between, you know, the game sort of preying on a player who might be addicted to it, versus being, you know, so loose that no one ever spends any money, and then your game flops and fails. So it's a very difficult tightrope to walk, and it can be a challenge. Wolfo78 asks, have you thought about playing games like Girls Frontline or Arknights? I don't actually know either of those games, so I'm not opposed to any particular game, so yeah, maybe I'll look those up and try to figure it out. In the meantime, I should show you how this game works. So there's one piece of UX in this game that is my favorite thing about it, and kind of the reason I wanted to share this, and that is how you queue up your next battle. So you've got these tabs on the right, with, like, you know, the army tab here lets me do things like, you know, upgrade my walls. I'm not actually using any walls right now, but now if I were to use them, they would be upgraded. And I'll show you more details on that later. So there's all these tabs here on the right. The shop, of course, encouraging me to buy more things. But when I'm on the battle tab, all I have to do is grab this right-hand side and spin it like a Price is Right wheel. And then it queues up an enemy army and immediately starts a fight. And now I'm not touching anything. All of my guys are just playing by themselves, Clash of Clans style, And so it's just like which troops I put down and how I arrange them that determines the outcome. So I still don't know if I have a chance of winning here. So yeah, so that guy took the fire from a lot of those archers. Oh, I just barely lost. Dang. All right, so I still get one. I guess it must not be a victory point because I get one even though I didn't win. But so I get a minor little bit of rewards, but it kind of encourages me to want to try again. The first several fights I had, I won handily, and I'm pretty sure that they were deliberately matching me against some of the worst armies that are out there. Or they might even, part of me wonders, because the other player who set up this opposing army isn't here and isn't watching and doesn't actually see what happens. In fact, I'm not even sure they ever get a report of what happened while they weren't playing. I kind of have a sneaking suspicion that the game might weigh each battle in favor of the attacker to give you more positive feelings about your experience. So like those very first several battles I played where I won every single one of them without any problem, and these were not sort of the tutorial bot battles. These had the names of players associated with them. It makes me think that they were putting their thumb on the scale just to make me feel successful. But now I'm starting to get into the point where I have to actually be any good at the game in order to succeed. And so far, I don't think I am. So you see these barriers here. These barriers don't fight, but they will slow down your melee troops and gives their ranged troops a lot of time to pelt you with projectiles. So it looks like I'm probably going to win this one. By the way, when it's down to archers at the very end, you'll notice that their rate of fire goes up. I'm betting that players, used to that they used to playtest this game, and the very end where the archers were all firing at each other was just the most boring part because there wasn't any more like rock paper scissors mechanics. No more interest in just like who's going to move where, what's going to happen. It's just everyone shooting at each other, and eventually the person with the most archers is going to win. They're just like, you know what? Might as well, when we detect that we're in that scenario, might as well just speed it up, get the player through it, and let them see what happens next. So I really appreciate that. It feels like they're doing you don't always think of solutions like that, like speeding up at the very end. Like that's the kind of thing where you're like, well, this is how the game works. These two armies line up, and then they just fight until they're done. And the idea of speeding up at the end probably, I would assume, came from listening to a lot of player feedback, which is really key when you're making games like this, especially a game that's trying to, succeed on a tiny little margin of players spending just a little bit more than it costs to maintain the servers that keep the game playable. Relying on player feedback, really understanding player feedback is absolutely key to your success. So Wolfo says that he's surprised that I don't know about either of the games that he mentioned. Yeah, sorry about that. I try my best to keep track of as many different games as I can, but the game industry is just so huge. Even somebody who is absolutely committed to trying to stay on top of things is going to miss a lot of stuff, and I don't know if there's much I can do about that. Girls Frontline actually does sound familiar. I've got an image in my head of a particular game when I hear that title, but I'm not confident that I'm thinking of the right one, so I didn't want to jump in and act like I knew what I was talking about. I do tend, my personal tastes tend to run along indie games on PC, the kind that come out on Steam or on Epic, and so that's where I sort of spend a lot of my time researching and trying to find out about those games. So I miss a lot of stuff on mobile. Occasionally I'll get onto a mobile kick and I'll go and start looking through a bunch of mobile games, but it's fairly rare compared to my other interests. So that might be why I missed out on those games. So you'll notice that dotted line with the question mark around that wagon up there. I've got 5 of 15 now. If I keep running battles, then eventually that will fill up and it'll give me a bunch of prizes. So one thing I'm noticing is I've set this little ice trap here, but the enemy never seems to come over to my side. And I don't know if it's just because I've set up my army to just be, include a whole bunch of really aggressive troops, or if there's something about being the attacker or being, the person who's playing the game that means my army just tends to rush over to their side. Let's actually have a look. Because I'm getting defeated more often than not, let's just try to adjust my army. So this ice trap, I'm not really succeeding at figuring out the right way to use that, so let me just take a break from that one for a bit. Am I? Okay, I'm not quite able to upgrade these troops, but I can recruit a new one. So let's do that. Let's recruit some sort of low-level spearmen. I don't quite have enough gold to upgrade them, But yeah, let's drag these guys over here. So basically, I'll have some kind of cheaper, crappier spearmen in the front. I'll have these tougher spearmen join in. Whatever horrible thing is going to happen to these guys in the front, I'll save my stronger guys to come in afterwards and deal with it. And these little swarming dogs, I'm not actually sure what they're for. Like, usually they get annihilated really, really fast. I assume they must have some kind of rock, paper, scissors relationship with a different unit that makes them really valuable. I haven't figured it out yet, so I keep them in my army because I want to see them be effective at something. Usually what they do is get annihilated by archers really early on. Though actually, maybe what I want then is to put them near the back, so that get the archers targeting somebody else and let these guys come in later? I don't know if that's going to be good or not. Let's give it a try. Okay, so it looks like they actually, that set of enemy dogs actually did a pretty good job of making short work of my spearmen. So maybe that's what they're for. Maybe they're for fighting spearmen on the front lines. Like, they do damage quickly before the spearmen can do much about them, whereas the archers, or the guys with the huge hammers that do area effect damage, can just make short work of them. The problem is with games like this, is trying to anticipate in advance what the enemy army is going to look like, because you're playing against so many different enemy armies that you can't come up with one configuration that perfectly opposes every single enemy configuration. You just have to sort of choose the strategy you think will be the most broadly applicable, and just occasionally get defeated by enemies that try something novel that you weren't prepared for. Yeah, so at least, in a game like Clash Royale, you can just make some decisions on the fly that, or Guns Up is this way too, that you can make decisions on the fly while the game is being played that can take, an army that you've created that might not be a perfectly winning army against a particular opponent, and, your decisions, during the game can make a difference to your success or failure. Here. So Wolf78 says, so indie games are more your speed. Got it. The only game I've heard as being classified as an indie game that I really enjoy would be Stardew Valley. Other than that, it's more active games like State of Decay, Fallout 4, Warframe. Yeah, so I do like those kinds of, like, those big AAA or sometimes, AA games, that are like extremely high production values, very immersive. I actually just finished The Last of Us 2 and was absolutely blown away by what the game was able to pull off. If anything, I felt like it might have been just a little bit long, because I kept thinking I was at the end and being like, okay, yes, I'm right at the end, I'm about to have the conclusion, and then it would be like, no, there's still, like, you're a third of the way through the game. There's still a bunch more to go. So that happened to me a couple of times. I did eventually get through it, and I absolutely loved it. But at the same time, like, I'll play a game like that for a certain amount of time, and then it kind of exhausts me. It kind of makes me tired, because it takes so much emotional energy to get really invested in a high production value cinematic game. And a lot of what I love about indie games is a lot of times that they're much lower key in terms of their demands on your emotional engagement. And so for somebody like me who's got a demanding job, working from home, also helping to take care of 4 kids, I often feel like I don't have a lot of emotional energy left. And so something like The Last of Us 2 or like State of Decay can just be overwhelming for me, and I don't really, just have the energy to get into it. But a little game like this, or, a lot of the indie games that I play, even something like RimWorld, which it takes, it's a very long-term investment, I can just drop into it and just goof around with it for a little bit, and I don't feel like it's really demanding that I get immersed the same way a lot of big AAA games do. Anyway, so let's just run one more battle of this. Okay, yeah, so it's just interesting, kind of like Missile Command Recharged, there are these just really subtle things that sort of determine the outcome. It's like each element of this game has got a very simple set of rules determining what it does. But those very simple rules, the fact that they're all happening at once, means that it adds up to a level of complexity that you can't fully solve. And solvability is a problem for games. Like if you're playing a game that's got a bunch of systems, but you're able to sort of work out the math problem in your head of exactly the perfect way to solve those math problems, and basically you can play perfectly every time, then that game is basically over for you. You've won it to a degree that it actually is just plain not interesting anymore. So a game like this has to really resist that sense. Like if there is a perfect strategy that is better than every other strategy, and you can really clearly lock it down, then the game's over and nobody wants to play it. It's the sheer amount of complexity that comes from, well, what happens if I move this character 5 pixels to the left and they arrive just a little bit later, against an enemy army? That can make the difference between victory and failure. And so even though each element of this game is pretty easy to understand, you can watch the characters, see how they behave, learn about what they do, and predict things about them. And there's not like a ton of mystery involved in that. Still, at the same time, there's so much of that going on at once, and there's so much butterfly effect where a small change can have an outsized impact. You can never fully solve the game, which is a big mark in its favor. So okay, let's open up this. So as you level up, as you gain experience, you get these like bigger rewards that do things like, oh, I can be a witch. Oh, I've got a new skin from archers. And, oh, I've got a new skin. Just a bunch of new skins. Well, that's cool. I wonder, do skins cost anything to use? Or now that I've unlocked them, can I just use them? Let's have a look at that. So, looks. Oh, okay. So, I can decide what I look like. Well, she's pretty awesome. Looks like... How do I put a new skin on? Oh, here we go. Skins. Okay, so I can just have all my archers wear crimson now. And I can have the Amazon. Okay, so now my army looks just a little bit different from all of the noob armies. I'm no longer a bacon hair. So, now I will celebrate my no longer being a complete and utter noob by switching to the end screen. So, subscribe if you want to. And, there's some other videos up there. And we'll wrap this up and move on to something else.